Hello and welcome back to the Passion Stories podcast. I'm your host, Emma Cole. And as always, we have got an episode absolutely filled to the brim with passion. And we are so here for it. In other news, we had the Malta International Air Show, which was quite something this weekend. It included the Red Arrows coming over, some jets doing some crazy twirly things in the skies, and it was, whilst obviously there is a huge sort of question mark over the environmental impact of this show, when you take it just as for the skills and the incredible adrenaline rush that these pilots must have, it was quite something. And they were flying so well. When I say so close to the houses, I'm probably exaggerating, but they were flying into this bay. You know, there was a lot of twirling and twisting and then dropping down and then straight back up. And I don't know if anyone's ever been on Stealth, the roller coaster at Thorpe Park, throwback, but there is a point where you go over a lip of the roller coaster and you are looking directly down and then you shoot down for what feels like a lifetime. Anyway, these pilots are just going down, doing that repeatedly and then straight back up and down. It is phenomenal. And just imagining the G-force and the whole entire experience. And it was just quite something. And I do wonder how you get to become a Red Arrow pilot and what it's like. I feel like we're going to have to get one on the podcast because it feels like you've got to be very, very passionate to do that kind of thing and highly skilled. So yeah, I just find that fascinating. Anyway, let's get on to this week's episode's guest, who is Juliette Denny. And Juliette is an ultra runner and an adventurer. She's done Ironman. She's recently been at UTMB in Chamonix, which is, she's going to tell us all about it, but it's the Mecca of trail running. And, you know, her journey into ultra running is incredibly inspiring. So be prepared because you might find yourself signing up for some races. She's also going to tell us about Black trail runners and the work the group do in promoting diversity on the trails, and how we can be an ally and how we can improve access and representation, both for women and people from diverse backgrounds. And then we discuss just the epic summer of women's sport. So without further ado, please welcome to the podcast, Juliette Denny. Juliette, thank you so much for coming on the Passion Stories podcast. It is wonderful to have you on. How did you get into running such a long way?
And that's a really good question. I wouldn't say by accident, but I wouldn't say it was entirely intentional either. So I grew up playing football. Football was my sport for many years. And I played to high level in the country, kind of Premier League level as it was at the time. So it was kind of taking up a lot of my time, obviously. And I got to about 25, 26 and realised I was starting to fall out of love with it, which was a weird feeling because it would be my life and my identity for such a long time. And I was Juliette, the girl who played football. It was like a synonymous thing that people said. And for me, that was quite important to have a control of my own identity because I grew up in a very white, rural countryside town, which was lovely. I loved it. And it was a beautiful place to grow up. But you are almost identified by your looks versus, especially if you're the only black kid in school, apart from my sister, you are kind of easily identified by, oh, Juliette, not the black kid, but that was said once. But I think what was really nice for me is that I was always Juliette, the girl who plays football. So my identity was tied to something I chose, if that makes sense. So then to decide, okay, I don't think I love football anymore. I'd still enjoy it, but I didn't want to play. And it kind of tied in with a difficult personal time. So basically, I got a phone call from a friend from school and she said, are you sat down? I was like, I'm in Tesco, but like, crack on. You know, can't be that bad. You know, you're probably going to tell me some sort of drama. And she was like, I've got a brain tumour. And I was like, oh, okay. Should not be in Tesco right now. And it was, a really difficult time for me because I, for the first time, came across something I couldn't fix. And not that that's not me being like, I can fix everything, but you know how you have like a kind of fixing mentality and trying to have a positive impact on whatever's going on. And I'm like, I'm not a brain neurologist, surgeon thing. I can't do anything about this. And it kind of impacted me in a couple of ways. The first one was really made me question why I was carrying on spending a lot of my life doing something I didn't know I loved anymore. So that was kind of where I kind of came to the decision that football might be time to stop playing. And then I also thought with my fix-it mentality, I thought, well, if I can't do something to help her directly, like maybe I can raise money for a charity. And so I thought I really wanted to raise money for the brain tumour charity, obviously very closely tied. And I thought I needed to do something quite big because I wanted to raise a lot of money. That was my logic at the time. So we both went to school in Brighton, and there's a trail near what goes through, kind of through or above Brighton, called the South Downs Way. So I thought, I'm going to run the South Downs Way. It was 112 miles. I had no idea what that meant because I'd only run maybe like 10K in one point each time in training for football. So I think my naivety helped me there, because I think if I knew what I was facing, I probably wouldn't have done it. And I knew I needed help. So I emailed around work at the time and said, anyone fancy running 112 miles? I just wanted one person to say yes, because then I wouldn't have to do it on my own. And actually 6 people said yes. And none of us knew what we were doing. Like, I cannot emphasize that enough. There were no gels. There was nothing really technical, no aid stations, anything like that. But we trained in inverted commas, because now I know what it actually means to train for these things. And yeah, we had some amazing adventures in the build up. But I was dealing with the emotional impact of my friend getting worse. And then a couple of weeks before we were due to run, she actually passed away, which was obviously like an incredibly tough time for me, for her family, for even for the people who didn't know her who were running with me, but they knew the impact that why we were doing this. And so I had nowhere near processed it by the time we started to run. And we set off at the end of September, because our logic was that we'd have it long enough over summer to train as long as we possibly could, but it's before the clocks changed, so we'd have more light.
I love it.
What we didn't think about was that it would rain. And so none of us took a waterproof for 3 days, running through the South Downs in torrential rain. We had a barber jacket. I don't know whose that was, but it just, none of it really, really helped. And over the course of those 3 days, we all struggled, of course. There were a lot of tears, a lot of dodgy knees, a lot of hugs just in silence, a lot of trudging in silence. But what that run taught me was that I needed to let other people support me as well. So in a time where I was feeling really vulnerable, I was crying at least twice a day, I would say. I now know that I probably need actual mental health support, but didn't know much about that at the time. But I actually think allowing those people to pull me through when I couldn't pull myself through really just showed me that it's not weak to be vulnerable. And I think that's what I learned from that first run, is that it doesn't have to be fancy. You don't have to have fancy kit, fancy gel. I mean, it helps sometimes having the good kit, I'm not going to lie to you, but you can do it without it. And all you need is the right people around you and a desire to go and do something that challenges you, that pushes you outside your comfort zone. And we did it, and we raised like £12,500 for the Brain Tumor charity, which was unbelievable. And we had a makeshift finish line from bunting that our friends brought down. Like, it was so budget, but it was so special. And it also just showed me just what there was on my front door that I had no idea about. These trails are beautiful. And now living in Brighton, I now see them all the time, and I think I've got over the trauma of that long weekend and actually enjoy them. But it just showed me there's so much on your front door that you don't necessarily know about. And I think then in COVID, I started trail running again, got back to it. I did a couple of things in between, and I decided I was going to take on an Ironman and all that sort of stuff. But then when COVID hit, obviously everyone was confined to where they were. I went back to my mum and dad's, which is just in Lewistown over, and just realised that I had grown up in that little village and at no point had ever explored the multitude of trails that were on my doorstep. And it really gave me space to think and space to feel like I was getting a bit of perspective. And from that point on, I think I've just kind of stuck into it.
And I was going to ask, what was your friend's name who passed away?
Laura.
And when you think about where you've got to now, and it all started with Laura, how does it make you feel knowing that you've
Do you know what? It actually really makes me laugh, because she hated sport. She really hated sport. Like, she was, I don't know how tall she was. I mean, I'm not very tall, I'm 5'3", so she was always really tall to me, but I think she was like 6'2", I want to say, or at least like 6 foot, and all like limbs and no coordination. And like, she won't mind me saying that. We very much, that was a thing we always talked about. But she really disliked sport, would try and do everything to get out of it. Would probably, I always think of the fact that when I'm like on a mountain or I'm there questioning like why am I doing this? And people say, I'll think of your why. And so I think of Laura, and she'd probably be going, what the hell are you doing? Like, just go and have a drink. Like, can you just sit down? Like, just relax. And it always actually makes me laugh at the irony that I have decided to take what her passing taught me and use it in something that she would absolutely not enjoy at all.
Oh, I love that. And I mean, it's absolutely incredible what you've done off the back of that, because you've gone from the South Downs Way to recently running 100K in Chamonix at sort of the Mecca of trail running, at a
Yeah.
race called the CCC. Can
Yeah.
you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so CC is actually a really interesting one. And this is only the second time I've really actually spoken publicly about it. Like I've spoken to Instagram, but it's just to a camera, isn't it? But I think CCC was really interesting for me. So long story short, didn't finish it. And I spent 6-7 months training for that because I chose to do CCC because I'd got all the kind of, so for listeners who are not familiar with UTMB, and that week you have to basically qualify for the race that you want to do by collecting stones, which you get from doing UTMB branded races, and you have to have what's called an index, which basically proves that you're capable of doing that distance. So you're capable of doing 100K or 50K or whatever it is. So I'd done all the work beforehand in the kind of preceding 2 years to get the stones and get the index, and I could basically choose between applying for CCC, which is 100K, and OCC, which is like the 57K. Both of them are incredible races in their own right and so tough regardless of what you pick. But I think for me, I wanted to pick the one that actually scared me. And OCC I thought would be beautiful and still be really hard, but it didn't scare me. Like I didn't think I would have that possibility of failure, which is, I never go into something thinking I'm going to fail because I think that's a terrible mentality to have. But I picked CC because it would be the first 100 kilometers race I'd ever done. It would be an over 6,000 meter mountain race, which I've never done. Not like as in total elevation. I don't just climb up 3/4 of Everest, but it was going to be a big race. And so I picked that and immediately went, what have I done? And I reached out, got some help from coaching from good friend Lewis, who coached me, and did all the work beforehand, got to Chamonix 2 weeks before to acclimatise, did everything I could, and then got to race day, had 3 of my really good friends as my crew, which was amazing. And it was really hard, unsurprisingly. And I always knew I was going to be within about an hour or so of cutoffs because the cutoffs are pretty tight. And that's not me being like, I'm a bad runner. Like I know I'm, by nature of me even getting to the start line, how much work I put in. But I think CC is the first race I've started. I thought I don't know how this is going to go. And all I wanted to do was, I said to myself when I first got that email saying I got it, was get to the night before, look in the mirror and know that you've done everything you can. And that's what I did. And I was like, I cannot think of anything else I had the capacity or capability to do in this build up that would have put me in better stead to succeed. And then you roll the dice on the day. And I rolled the dice and it didn't quite land in my favor. And basically, we had some pretty horrific weather, heavy rainstorms, thunder at one point, lightning at one point. We had freezing cold temperatures as you got to the highest point. So as we crossed in Switzerland, my asthma kicked off big time because it was kind of around like 0 minus numbers. And it's just not something I could have planned for. And from that point on, which was probably, how far is that in? About 38 kilometers in, I think, I was wheezing basically. And I had my inhaler and everything like that. But then it became I need to keep pushing because I'm getting closer and closer to cutoffs, but I can't push much more. Otherwise I'm going to have an asthma attack at the top of Switzerland. So it was a real constant mental battle and looking at your watch constantly, looking at time and cutoffs and all that sort of stuff. Got to the first aid station, one of my crew members there, he picked me right. I don't know what he said, but he just said the right things and hugged me and did everything I needed and then sent me off into the distance with a cup full of rice and Pepsi, and somehow it's a delicacy, I tell you what. But it was, yeah.
So is that mixed, rice and Pepsi mixed
Yes,
together?
basically, the idea was you have, your little soft cups that you have at races or whatever, you would have one of them. And so we started with broth and rice, which is like a legitimate, like carbs, bit of salt, perfect, got that down. But then there was still some rice at the bottom of the cup and I was like, I need some Pepsi. Let's put it in there. And then I had this weird brothy Pepsi rice mix, which listeners will probably not think is very nice. Cannot tell you what that did. It was like an elixir through my veins and set me off in good stead, which was good because that was when we were heading into the night section, which psychologically is just, yeah. And because I was at the back, towards the back, like it wasn't quite at the back, but I was getting there, it meant that the trails had got really churned up by the time we got to them after the thunderstorm as well. So at one point we were coming down a switchback, which was something like 800 meters drop, maybe 600 meters drop in like a kilometer. It was wild. It was so steep. it was a switchback with no barriers. And I suddenly thought, I could go over the edge here. And that just psychologically, yeah. But got to that aid station. I had 4 hours to get to the next checkpoint. I'm saying to my crew, I literally can't do it. And nothing they could have said at that point would have helped, which is weird because you always think, oh, people can bring you up, whatever. And I knew is the weird clarity in my head, like they're doing a good job, but nothing is going to help me here. A little group hug, off I went. And I started to have a conversation with myself at that point out loud because it's 3 a.m. You're in the mountains. Who cares? And it was weird, but I started to talk to myself like I used to talk to myself at football, which was if I had a big game or a final or whatever, I'd be like, and my dad would always say to me as well, like, leave everything out there on the pitch. Like, don't come off with any regrets. Like, this is when you have to give it your all. You don't want to, don't come off wishing you'd done more. And so I was kind of talking to myself out loud going, you've got to have the mountain of your life right now. Like this has got to, you got to leave it all out there. You know, I was giving myself the pep talk, put my get it done headphones playlist in. And I went for it. And I say I went for it, but if anyone looks at my Strava, it's slow. But I got to the top of the mountain, looked at my watch and went, oh, I'm not going to make it. I can't get down in time. And then it started to get a bit lighter. And then the trails became a bit more runnable. And I kind of looked at my watch, I was like, you might be able to make it. And then I just kind of decided, well, if not now, then when? And just kind of went for it. And I must have overtaken, I don't know, I've never checked, 20 people or so, maybe more on that section, that final section coming down into that checkpoint at Vallorcine, which was the 82-kilometre mark. And I got down to the bottom and I could see the checkpoint. I had 9 minutes left. I was like, I'm gonna make it. I'm gonna make checkpoint. And then the route turned us right instead of left. And I was like, oh, I don't think I'm going to make it again. And it took us probably about 600 meters away and then back, which in a normal day, doing that in 10 minutes, fine. But when you've got 82 kilometers in your legs and you're psychologically shattered and you've gone through a night and you've gone through a rainstorm and you're having 5 minutes away from an asthma attack at all points, it's just the furthest distance you've ever done in your life. And I got over this railway bridge about 4 minutes to go. My friend's husband, Ben, was there and he's like, you have to run. I was like, Ben, I literally got nothing left. I can't run. And he's like, just run. You can do it. You can do it. So I started plodding. I saw my crew member Liv and she's like, don't worry, you've got time. You can do it. But she was crying at the same time. So I'm like, I don't know if I do have time because you're crying.
Oh my God.
But I don't know what happened. I ran into the checkpoint and I saw my other crew member, guy. He's like, you just got to go in and out, straight in and out because the timing point's on the outside. Get in and out, we'll sort you out there. So I literally for me, sprinted in, literally in the door, out the door, over the timing mat and basically nearly collapsed. I was just they were like, you did it with 45 seconds to spare. I was like,
oh my God.
I just kept repeating, I can't believe I've done that. I had no right to do that. How have I done that? At the same time, Guy, one of my best mates, he's chucking potatoes in my mouth to try and get me to eat something because I haven't eaten. So I'm literally I don't know, it's carnage. It's on film somewhere. I hope they'll give it to me at some point. But it was just this euphoric moment of that I felt like I had got myself there because I had fully backed myself that I had to, it was all on me basically to have that talk with myself, to decide top of the mountain, let's full send, let's not give up, let's try and sprint. And it was incredible. To me, that was my finish line moment in a lot of ways. But it wasn't because then I had to keep going. And I had 18 kilometers left. And I knew the next section was actually probably one of the most technical sections of the course. I'd done it a few times before. The descents in it are short and very tree rooty or whatever. You have to basically climb down. And I knew that I was going to be cutting it really fine. Annoyingly, at that point, my asthma kicked off again. I think the adrenaline dropped after I'd got over that timing chip. And probably about 2 kilometers before I reached the checkpoint, I was like, physics and time does not allow me to get there, basically. And so I got to La Flégère, which is the final checkpoint, 94 kilometers in, 95 kilometers in, depending on whose watch you look at. I'd done all 6,100 meters of the climbing that there was in the entire race. And I got there and I got cut off because I was 10 minutes too late. And all I had to do was run 6K downhill after that. And I was like, I know I can do that, but they wouldn't let me. And that was a real low point just because I'd kind of done it, but I hadn't. And I felt like I was kind of robbed of that finish line moment. And I think I also got frustrated because I got cut off and I got cut off with people who were starting the wave before me, who started 15 minutes earlier. And I was like, I only needed the 10.
Oh my God.
So that was just, and that's like, it's not me complaining about the race or anything like that. That is how it is. And you know that when you set out, like it's not but it is just objectively frustrating.
Yeah.
And I was really lucky there because James Cook, who was the other one on the crew, and then my friend Amy were there. And like, I literally just proper broke down on them because I was just like, I can't believe I've come all this way. Like, I've let everyone down. You know, everything that you think when you fail at something you set out to do. And then I kind of, hid myself in a hole for a day or so, but I had to kind of tell everyone, obviously. So I put out this Instagram post that was basically just like me upset and sort of summarizing what had happened. And the most amazing thing happened, which was hundreds of people messaged me. Like hundreds of people were just like, no, like you're amazing, all these sort of things, which weirdly you never actually hear. Like you never hear that you've inspired people directly. Like people might day to day think about it, whatever. And that's like, I don't need affirmation from anybody to keep doing what I'm doing, but it's more that you rarely have people say to you that they felt inspired by you or whatever. So that was actually like the most emotional thing of the entire, you can see I'm getting emotional. It was just the most emotional thing because I posted that, put my phone down, didn't look at it for about 10 hours. And then picked up my phone. I was like, oh, whoa, yeah, what is going on? And it was just so special. And I think that made me realize that like failing at it would have been to not step up to the start line in the first place and not try and not push myself. And yes, I didn't get my finish line moment, but ultimately, like I set out to inspire people. Like I set out to inspire people of color to, go into the mountains and feel like they belong and challenge themselves. And, people who think, oh, that isn't for me, and show them that it is for them and that you don't have to be at the front of the race to have a profound experience or whatever it is. Even though the profound experience was a roller coaster for me.
Definitely.
I think I actually, when I took a reflection on it, did do almost everything I set out to do. And, maybe I needed to fail at it, in inverted commas, to have that moment where actually I realized I was doing everything right,
Yeah. I think it's so inspiring. And as you say, like there's so much more to a race than its finish line.
Yeah.
Like all the training and everything that you did is, one part of it. But, the amount of people you've inspired, like getting all those Instagram messages, like I've seen your Instagram account, it's incredible. Like, and I think it just shows like, we're all human and you don't always succeed in the way that you want to, but you have 100% succeeded in another way. And it's awesome. It's so inspiring to see.
Thank you.
And it's like, these 100-kilometer races, there's always, at least from my view, that this idea, this Instagram of like, oh yeah, just a cheeky little jog over, that a lot of people don't necessarily show the difficulties and the challenges and the reality of what it is.
Yeah.
And it's incredibly refreshing to see that. And I mean, you were talking just there about, showing people of color that they should be on the trails, that these trails are for everyone. Because you're also part of Black Trail Runners. Can you explain a little bit more about the barriers, for more diversity on the trails and what Black Trail Runners do?
Yeah, I mean, there's quite a few, different ways you can look at it. I think for me, in a most simplistic view, I think it is about showing that the trails are for everybody and that just because something is how it is doesn't mean that it should be like that forever. And I think we find that I've found me in so many places where I have looked around and not seen anybody who looks like me. And I think what that does to you is even if you've done all the training, worked really hard, you then question, like, do I have a right to be here? Like, do I belong here? Like, can I do this? Because if nobody else who looks like me does this, maybe I can't do this. And actually what we're trying to do is just show that the trails are for everybody, that there are plenty of safe spaces out here and that we want to basically just make it the norm that we are in these spaces. I think one of the things that was amazing this UTMB week is that myself, Rebecca, Serena, Sabrina, Angela, Grace and Nathalie all turned up to do a UTMB race. So 3 of them did ETC, which is 15K, their first UTMB race, which is the one that you don't have to like collect stones for. So you can kind of get get to see what the mountains are like. It's a really cool race. And then myself and Serena, Sabrina and Rebecca had qualified for the various races, so OCCCC and UTMB, by doing, our own races. I think what was really cool is that we'd all got ourselves there ourselves. So whether it's, we'd all paid the money to go and do these races, we'd all, done the training, and then collectively we're all there and we kind of gathered and we're like, oh, we're actually like making a bit of a statement here, aren't we? We're doing something pretty cool. And, it was still the fact that the only other Black woman I saw on the start line was Serena who I knew, kind of says that we're not anywhere near where we need to be. I think what Black Trail Runners are trying to do is create a way in for people who are worried about being the only person who looks like them in a space. So it is really intimidating, for example, if you've never been out on the trails, to just be like, oh, just put your shoes on and go trail running. Like, it's not that simple. There's barriers to entry from a kit perspective, not just knowing what to get, but also cost and accessibility. But then there's also barriers to getting to the trails as well, because again, cost, train tickets, driving, etc., but also just feeling like you're going to be welcome there when you get there. You know, the countryside in the UK is predominantly not a diverse space, and that's a huge generalization, I know, but just kind of creating, for example, like introduction runs and stuff like that, where you're like, I'm going to go with a group who I know that I'll be safe with. I'm going to try out the trails. I'm going to learn a few bits, and then I might feel confident going on my own. And that's ultimately the space we're trying to create. But also, I think there's plenty of us and, you know, all those women who are at that start line in UTMB who are happy to have those uncomfortable conversations, who are happy to say, let's talk about it. You know, what is going wrong? And I think one of the things I have had conversation about recently is to people who want to be allies, who want to say, you know, I can recognize that my space is not as diverse as it perhaps could be. What can I be doing to show people that my space is welcoming and that they are, you know, they will have an amazing time here. And one of the things that I have kind of said back to that is, you're here listening to our stories and you're here being inspired by us in whatever way, and you're here going, I need to make some change in my own spaces. Well, you are in spaces that we're not in. So the run club that you're saying is not as diverse as it could be, or the community that's saying is not as diverse as it could be, you're in that. So you have an opportunity to introduce us into those spaces and say, hey, look, I heard this amazing story. Why don't you listen to this podcast, for example? Why don't you watch this amazing film that these women have made about doing this race? Bring us into your spaces. Because a lot of, you know, people very fairly say, I don't want to tell your stories for you. I don't want to take your space. Great. Please don't invite us in, you know. And I think that's what we want more of, is the opportunity to be visible in those spaces, so that then the people who are the quiet watchers, you know, the people who are on social media or in the back of the run club or whatever, have a friend who might want to come but doesn't know if they'll be welcome, can go, they take that message out there without even knowing. And I think that's what we want to also achieve. I think we're all doing it in our own spaces, which is amazing. And then collectively, obviously, working towards the same goal as well, which is great, because there's so many different spaces. Like, you know, I'm in Brighton, you know, Sabrina's in the West Country. You've got people all over, the Becky's up in Hebden Bridge. Like, we're all in different spaces, but we're all working towards the same goal, which is ultimately, I think, just trying to make it normal that we do this. Like, it's not, I'm not personally trying to go for anything revolutionary. I just want you to be not surprised when you see a person of colour at the start line. I don't mean you specifically. I'm surprised sometimes because I know how rare that is. And I don't, you know, when I go to Black to the Trails, for example, which is an incredible festival of trail running, which is run by Black Trail Runners. And it is a really, really special day because it is the most diverse trail running event in the world. And you go there and you see people of all colours, all sizes, all religions, all backgrounds, everything. Everybody is there for the love of the trails. And it's the only trail race I think I've ever been to where you realise you are one of many, not one of a few. And you're not standing out unconsciously, if that makes sense. Because I think a lot of the time, sometimes you go to these races and you feel like you stand out by definition, because I mean, my big hair, easy to spot. Like, I am easy to spot, particularly in an environment where it's all white people. And it's also easy to spot Becky and everybody else in those races. And we quite often see each other like, hey, because it is kind of rare to see us there, but it's getting less rare. And the more and more we have these conversations, the more and more that we visibly put ourselves out there, put ourselves in spaces, take up space, be invited into these spaces, the more and more people are going, oh, okay, this might be for me. This might be something I want to try and do. And that's ultimately all I want. And I think what's really amazing is I always kind of use this example, and I'm sure she doesn't mind, but Rebecca's daughter and her son, Walter and Etta. And because I've obviously been around them quite a bit over the last few years. And I love the fact that she is growing up, and him as well, to be honest, growing up, that it is completely normal that their mum does that.
Yeah.
And that women of colour do that, and this is a sport that we're very much a part of. And I think if we can have that amazing positive impact on that next generation, they are, I'm using their examples, which is, you know, probably unfair to all kids because they are wonderful, brilliant kids. They will question that, and if they go into spaces where, there's not any black women running or not any black women competing or whatever, they will say like, oh, why? They will ask those questions. I think if we can create that sort of curiosity and questions and accountability from the younger generation, then, who knows what can happen in the future. And I really think, I know that in the world right now, there's a lot of negative stuff going on, but I think that is a real positive that I'm seeing, is that there's a next generation coming through who things that weren't normalized for us are normalized for them in terms of participation and diversity.
Yeah, I mean, that's absolutely awesome. And, linked to that, I guess, is also we're seeing it, because you mentioned you liked football. This summer has been sort of an incredible summer for women in sport in general. We've had the Euros. We've had so many amazing events. We had the Tour de France Femme. We've had women just doing incredible things, breaking world records left, right and centre.
Yeah.
And then we've obviously recently had the Women's Rugby
World Cup final.
The Women's Rugby World Cup final. And you were there. Can you tell us a little bit about it, how you feel about it?
Such a whirlwind. I had been looking for tickets, obviously, since I basically missed the first drop of tickets. And of course, all the finals got snapped up straight away because everyone backed England, rightly so. And I just randomly went on Friday afternoon and was just like, maybe there's a real resale ticket. And there were two, and I got them from me and my dad, and it was just this whirlwind of like, are you free? Yeah, okay, well, we're gonna go tomorrow. He's like, what? Because I first started watching rugby when it was the Men's World Cup final in 2003. First rugby match I ever watched. My dad dragged me to like the local rugby club. I was protesting the whole way. I was like, this is gonna be boring, I want to go play football. And actually I loved it. And what was interesting though is it wasn't something that ever crossed my mind that I could do. And it wasn't like, my parents encouraged me to do whatever I wanted to do, and they still do, but it wasn't anything that ever crossed my mind was that women played rugby, because it was such a brutal sport and such a intense. And I was like, oh, it looks like only men can do this, and then it was when I got to uni and I realised, oh, women do play rugby. Like, that's kind of cool. But at that point, the fear had kind of come in, and I was like, I'll just play tag rugby. I don't want to play the full contact thing. But yeah, since then I've kind of loved it. And I think what's been amazing for me as someone who, grew up playing football and had to make a choice between trying to go professional and taking a full-time career, and I chose career, and I'm very glad, I am where I am and I love it. I do think it's amazing now that young kids can grow up and go to their teacher, hey, I want to be a footballer, and their teacher can't go, you can't, because I had a teacher who did that for me. She wasn't trying to dissuade me from my dream. She was trying to be like, you probably need to get a job as well. But they can aspire to reach the top level of these sports, and people can't be like, oh, it's not a real job, that's not whatever. And I love it. I also love the fact that the women's sport, particularly football, is being more vocal about the challenges that they face from a racism perspective, and I just think it feels like, and again, it's quite a generalization, but just from a observer's perspective, it feels like women's sport feels more confident to call out when things are wrong. With Jess Carter suffering from racist abuse, so many of those players have dealt with that. And I know that the men's team have also struggled with that. It's not an isolated problem. But I think what has been really encouraging is the way that the women's team have been really vocal to call out when when something feels wrong. And I just also love the way that this summer, the women's team seem to have come together in a way that we haven't really seen in other sports before. So you've got like the women's football going to watch the rugby watching the football, the netball watching, all these international teams are just all supporting each other and being one. And then you've even got players from other teams supporting, Ilona Maher, obviously a huge icon now in women's rugby, and rightly so, actively talking about supporting another team in a different game because she wants to support her friends. I just think there's an atmosphere around women's sports, which is still incredibly competitive, but also incredibly respectful as well. And part of me actually on Saturday was thinking about this on the way home, and I think one of the things I find quite emotionally positive around watching women's sport is that every single one of them has had to fight for their right to be there. And I know that in any professional sport, you have to fight for your right to be there. But as a woman, there's another level of fighting, because they would have had so many people tell them that they should just go and get a real job, or they should not focus on, the rugby stuff, just almost belittling their dreams because they're not seen as proper professions. Is only, there's a lot of the England rugby team who've had 9 to 5s before. Some of them still do, which is amazing. And even though they're pro now, because of the fact that they, a lot of them are late 20s, early 30s, there would have been a long period of their lives where they did it purely for the passion of the game, probably sacrificed careers and life to pursue the thing they loved. And then to see them walk out in front of 82,000 people at Twickenham was just so overwhelming for me as a supporter. I don't even
Yeah.
know any of them personally, but it was incredible to see. And the same with the Euros, the same with the Tour de Femme is obviously growing hugely. And I think for all those people who say, oh, nobody watches women's sport, well, like, you're kind of just wrong, as we've proved again and again. But also, no one's forcing you to watch it. You get these predominantly men, but also some women, they're forcing it down our throats, blah, blah. There's an off button. Like, if you don't
Yeah.
want to watch it, you don't have to watch it. If you don't want to follow it, you don't have to follow it. But the fact that it's still growing regardless of that shows how many people do want to watch it and want to follow it. And I don't understand how, in a world where, if you say you love rugby, for example, oh, but I don't like women's rugby.
Don't. Oh my God, that makes me very cross.
Yeah, like,
It's like you're really missing something here.
yeah, exactly. Like the energy, the excitement is still there. The collisions are huge. Like
Yeah.
it is wild. And the same with football. I know that, like, as someone who's played football, like the women's game and the men's game is different. It is different, but it doesn't mean it's any less exciting. Like, you can watch men's football and you can watch women's football. We're not forcing you to choose. You can watch both. It's just more football. But also I think there's fights to pick, and a lot of people are very resistant to it. By all means, carry on being resistant, because everybody else who's not resistant, who wants to be part of it, is joining this wave, and it's unstoppable. And I said that at the weekend. I just think there is so much growth still there for the women's game across multiple sports, and I'm classing Tour de Femme as a game. Obviously, it's not a game, but across women's sports, because all these young girls are growing up and being like, whoa, I can do that. Like, I want to try that. And there's an amazing clip of this dad and his daughter watching I'm sure you've seen it.
I've seen it. I know exactly which one you're talking about.
Oh my gosh, that got me, because I was just like, that girl is growing up knowing that she could do that. Even if I have no idea of her talent, she could be the worst rugby player in the entire world. But if she loves it, she can play. And I love that. That's what I want more of.
I completely agree. And I mean, it's so heartwarming seeing, so it's her and her dad, she's in the stands, just like shouting, cheering, like they're both just going for it. Her dad's like taking some videos, you can just see the whole thing and you're like, this is what sport's about. Like, it's amazing getting everyone involved. And it kind of gives you goosebumps. I absolutely love it.
100%. I was just like, because I could kind of see like me and my 12 with my dad, like at this rugby club, there were only 3 people watching that as a men's game. And then suddenly you're here, you're just like, 82,000 people supporting these women. And I saw Portia Woodhouse, I think, the New Zealand women's rugby player, talking about, I think it was her, it might be someone else to be fair, talking about the fact that they thought no one was going to show up for their game, right? And then the stadium was basically full from the start of the New Zealand-France game, because everyone was like, I want to see this. Like, these are unbelievable players. And just how emotional it must have been for someone of her experience and level, and all the players, to be honest, kind of expecting that there wouldn't be any fans, and then their team bus not even be able to get there because there's too many fans. It's just, I love that. And it makes me so positive. And I just think anyone who's got a young girl right now, or even, and I'd say, a lot of time we talk about inspiring young girls, but actually young boys are part of this conversation as well, because if they grow up supporting women's sport, then when they are adults, like, what will this landscape look like then? I just think I'm actually weirdly excited to see where it goes, and all these kids coming through, and the change that I feel like we are on the cusp of, if this momentum continues. And what's really cool is there are so many other women's sports which haven't hit the limelight yet to the full degree that they can. And you're just like, can we see a time where England netball are going to be playing at Wembley? Like, I don't know. Like, who knows? It could happen.
We want it all.
I want to just, like, women's sport is awesome. And I just think, I don't see why you wouldn't be on board with it. That's what I've really, like, kind of, when I reflected on it, I'm like, I don't understand why fundamentally you wouldn't support women playing sports. It's not taking away from men's sports. I think hopefully the noise of those 82,000 people and the millions more watching will firmly be drowning out the people who are still stuck in an age where we are far past now.
I completely agree. Juliette, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. You've been a brilliant guest.
Thank you for having me. Thank you so much. It's been lovely chatting. That time has flown.
Oh my God, I'm just so buzzing. I felt like I had goosebumps for a lot of that because firstly, I mean, I just love women's sports so much I could explode. And secondly, I feel that Juliette's story is so inspiring. Going from, the sadness of her losing her dear friend Laura to now competing at UTMB, for being on those start lines, for having this incredible purpose and achieving amazing things. And, you just think, wow, like unreal what she's achieved and what she's going to achieve as well. You just feel like so impressive and amazing that she's done that despite all these barriers. And I think ultimately it just shows us, the conversation around the Women's Rugby World Cup and the Euros. And it's like sport has such an incredible way of uniting people. And it's just so cool when you think of how you can bring all these people together under, one sort of umbrella, which is sport, however way you want to spin it. And it's no surprise I'm the biggest sports fan. Well, it's no surprise that I'm a huge sports fan, and I just find that so wonderful. And I think also, that a lot of what Juliette said, right at the beginning, she talks about effectively being her own worst critic and how to push past that and having these people around you that lift you up. And, I'm sure many of us can relate to those feelings of when you think, you're not welcome at whatever this event you're at, and you're like, oh God, should I be here? You're questioning your own things and being surrounded by people that remind you, yes, you should be here, but also being, knowing people that will bring you in to that conversation. And I really thought her advice on how to be an ally is something that, we can definitely all really take on board and bring more people into our conversations. And I just feel so inspired and, grateful. So thank you so much, Juliette, coming on. That was utterly awesome. And go and check out Juliette on Instagram and the Black Trail Runners. I will pop all the links in the descriptions. And as always, make sure you follow, like, share, subscribe. You know the drill. So you know when the next episode with a wonderfully passionate person drops. And it's coming in a fortnight. Thanks to Toon Tank for the tunes.